in the outer reaches of Dominion-controlled space, orbiting the swirling storm-marbled surface of a gas giant named Veltraxis, a fleet of Talari warships drifted in calm formation. 20 vessels, gleaming with golden hull plating and adorned with the ancient sigils of conquest, moved like silent sentinels in the darkness. Their engines pulsed gently in the void, waiting for orders, waiting for purpose. The Talari Dominion had not known defeat in over 2 centuries. Their fleets had burned moons, dismantled resistance movements, and claimed systems before their victims had even named them. Arrogance wasn't a flaw among the Talari, it was culture, bred into them like bone. And the Talari took pride in their superiority, especially when it came to those younger, more reckless species still crawling out from their cradles. So when the early warning scanner on the Dominion's command ship registered an anomaly and unidentified objects slipping across the edge of their sensor net didn't raise alarm. It raised opportunity. Commander Karn, a tall, sharp-featured officer with sun-scorched skin and angular armor, stood before the bridge's viewing canopy, arms folded, eyes narrowed. The object's small, silent, barely detectable was drifting through Sector Deltanine, a region designated for heavy patrol due to the gravitational instabilities of Veltraxis and its 13 moons. To his analysts, it looked like a damaged probe or an unshielded mining drone. No heat signature, no communication, no engine trails. Dead. Send to scouts, Karn ordered with a dismissive flick of his wrist. Take it intact if it has data. Disintegrate it if it doesn't. The bridge crew obeyed without question. The Talari scout frigates veered from the formation and accelerated toward the contact. Karn didn't bother watching them go to him. This wasn't battle. It was cleanup. Some fringe world species probably tossed another piece of trash into space, and now it had. It's wandered into Dominion airspace. Perhaps it was human in origin. Were always careless with their tech. Earth ships were sturdy but crude, fast but loud, easy to track, easier to destroy. Karn remembered the first human ship he'd seen in combat. Clunky, bright, practically begging to be targeted. They fought hard, yes, but they bled just the same. Karn turned his attention back to the fleet's formation data, tuning out the TS. Chatter of the scout ships as they closed in. He missed the moment the transmission from the lead scout cut out. On the far edge of Veltraxis's magnetic shadow, something shifted in the dark. Not visibly, there was nothing to see, but space itself seemed to bend around it. A presence that didn't glow or reflect, didn't emit or absorb in ways Talari's sensors understood, like it wasn't there at all, like it was beneath visibility. 2 scouts reached the anomaly's last known position. Their scanners showed nothing. They launched flares, radar bursts, active scans. Still nothing. Then, without warning, both ships vanished. Not exploded. Not disabled. Gone. One frame they were on screen. The next, only debris. Minimal energy discharge. 0 weapon trails. No incoming signals. Warnings. Back on the Dominion flagship, a young comms officer looked up from her console, her scaled brow furrowed. Commander, we've lost telemetry from Scouts Alpha 2 and Alpha 5. Karn turned, confused. Lost how? Gone, sir. Instant loss. No distress, no visuals. One moment they were there, the next static. Karn approached the holotable, now flickering where the scout ships had been represented. Pressed a control, expanding the field view. Nothing. No wreckage. No weapons. Fire. No readings. A cold silence fell over the bridge. That silence stretched longer than it should have. Long enough to be unsettling, then a new signal appeared, barely a whisper. Across their passive array, not a transmission, a reflection. Something, moving fast, from within the sector. Where is it? Karn barked. Unknown, sir, the officer said, voice tight. It's not showing on our main scans. This is indirect. Possibly an echo? Echoes don't destroy ships, Karn growled. The officer swallowed hard. No, Commander. Don't. And in that moment, for the first time in years, Karn felt something foreign crawl into the back of his mind, a sensation he hadn't known since his earliest days of combat. Not confusion, not anger, doubt. Something was out there. Something their systems couldn't see. Something that killed without being heard, watched, or even noticed. And as the Dominion's fleet subtly began to reorient itself, shifting from patrol stance to a defensive web, the truth hovered quietly. Between every blinking console and every clipped command, whatever it was, it already saw them. Asterisk aboard the Silent Edge. There was no sound, no alarms, no humming engines, no chatter between crew. Only the soft, pulsing heartbeat of the ship itself felt more than heard, like a ghost rhythm through the bulkheads. The vessel drifted in calculated silence behind the fractured shell of a dead moon, hidden in the gravity shadow of Veltraxis. Its shape was sharp and knife-like, built with an angular stealth profile that made it look less like a ship and more like a shadow torn loose from the void. Its hull wasn't just black, it was empty, coated in adaptive material that devoured heat, radar, magnetics, even light. A ship designed not to be invisible, but to be undetectable by design. Inside, the bridge of the Silent Edge mirrored that quiet intent. No wide windows, no sweeping displays, just data layered, floating, minimal. Every crew station was compact and sealed, each operator working in complete silence unless absolute necessity dictated otherwise. It was not a place for comfort. It was a place for one purpose: elimination. Commander Reed sat in the command cradle. At the center, expression still and unreadable as streams of telemetry ghosted across his retinal HUD. A small human crew of 12 operated the vessel, each selected not for rank, but for restraint. This mission wasn't about destruction. It was about demonstration. The Dominion fleet, 20 ships, one heavy carrier, and a phalanx of patrol escorts had wandered straight into Earth's test range, uninvited, unaware. Their timing was perfect. Reed tapped a command into his control panel. The ship responded with eerie precision, adjusting its orbital drift by mere meters.
Ow.
Just enough to keep the Dominion's scanning patterns gliding across empty space. The Silent Edge was not cloaked. It didn't need to be. The Talari systems weren't even looking in the right dimension of thought. They've reoriented, whispered Keela, the ship's passive scan officer. Her voice was low, but clear. Switching to containment posture. Standard Dominion wedge. But they haven't flagged us. Of course not, Reed murmured. Their minds are still trained for war in the open. They're looking for heat, radiation, movement. They're not looking for silence.
Ow.
The bridge remained dim, lit only by soft blue and orange outlines flickering and narrow. Bands across each station, tactical engineering, navigation, silent professionals. Each of them had trained for over a year in psychological suppression, able to perform critical operations without conscious speech, without adrenaline spikes, without unnecessary thought, because the Silent Edge didn't just evade detection. From enemy ships, it was built to run quieter than its own crew. Reed stood slowly and moved to the forward display node, waved 2 fingers, bringing up a tactical hologram of the Talari formation. Each ship shimmered in deep crimson blazing. With power signatures, exposed weapon racks, high energy drives, they looked monstrous in the map view. But they were loud, bright, predictable. Are we still below emission threshold? He asked. 73% below baseline. Ambient grav scatter is masking us completely. We're indistinguishable. From local debris, Keela replied. They'd have to drop inside a kilometer to get a hard lock. They won't, Reed said, because they don't think anyone would ever get this close. He walked slowly back to his station, eyes fixed on the growing heat bloom from one of the Dominion patrol ships. Its drives were flaring, scanning pattern tightening. They were getting nervous? Good. Begin test phase 2, he said quietly. No kills yet. Just start taking their vision away. Keela's fingers glided over her controls. A soft vibration passed through the Deccan, noticeable to most. But Reed felt it in his boots. The The Silent Edge had launched signal mirrors, thin plates of nanocarbon, shaped like jagged asteroids. They scattered in a spiderweb of false sensor echoes, mimicking heat signatures and plasma discharge trails. To Talari sensors, they would look like fast-approaching fighters, maybe a cloaked scout squadron. Suddenly the Dominion formation began. Shifting again. 3 smaller ships peeled away from their wall, turning to face the ghost signatures. "What are they doing?" whispered Lieutenant Hale from engineering. "Exactly what we need," Reed replied. "They're looking in the wrong direction." Again. Then came the first burst of Cum's noise. Garbled Talari speech-raised voices, frantic query pings between. Vessels, their scouts were pinging empty space. Weapons were charging. But they still saw nothing real. They didn't realize that the Silent Edge was already inside their minimum safety radius. Reed lowered his voice, though he didn't need to. "Let's take their eyes." From the belly of the human ship, a long, flat canister was deployed, a dumb piece of metal, non-powered, untraceable. It tumbled into space, drifted with carefully calculated inertia, and released a cloud of micronized reflective dust. Invisible to the eye. Catastrophic to LiDAR. The lead Dominion destroyer blinked off the Talari. Command board, then a second, then a third. To the Dominion fleet, it was like a sudden storm of blindness. Their targeting arrays overloaded. Their rangefinders spun nonsense. The only thing their captains knew for certain was that something was nearby and they couldn't see it. "They'll fire blind," Keela warned. Reed smiled slightly. "Let them. I'll be shooting each other before they shoot us." He stared at the red blips on the screen as they jittered, flickered, began to shiver with confusion. The mighty Dominion fleet was panicking. He didn't need to destroy them yet. He just needed them to understand. The Predator didn't always roar. Sometimes it whispered, and by the time you heard it, it was already behind you. Asterisk in the chaos of deep space, silence isn't peace, it's the prelude to something deadly. And aboard the Silent Edge, the silence was absolute. Outside, in the cold vacuum beyond the shattered moonlet's gravity well, the Dominion fleet was unraveling. Not in flame, not in noise. In confusion, their destroyers were turning in tight. Arcs, scanning sectors they had already cleared, rotating their sensor dishes in widening spirals. Attempting to lock onto a threat that did not exist, at least not by their definition. The command ship's encrypted comms channels crackled with disjointed alerts. Loss of targeting sync. Intermittent shadow contact. Advise fall back to formation. Panic layered beneath the arrogance of a fleet that had never been blind before. Commander Reed stood motionless at the tactical station, watching the display as Dominion ship after Dominion ship spun uselessly, hunting ghosts in a sea of data. They didn't realize the ghost was inside the perimeter already. "Keela's voice came in low. All primary targets are visually isolated. They've gone full active scan mode. They're broadcasting louder than a solar flare." Reed nodded once. "Perfect." He didn't speak again. Instead, he gave a subtle motion with 2 fingers, and the Silent Edge responded, not like a ship, but like a living creature breathing in. The ventral launch bays split open with no sound, no tremor, just a smooth mechanical bloom that released a trio of sleek, finless drones, each no larger than a suitcase and completely unarmed. They weren't weapons, they were mirrors. Each drone drifted toward a Dominion vessel, riding on pre-programmed vectors, carrying filament-thin sheaths of transparent composite glass. These sheaths would momentarily wrap around the surface of the alien hull, creating false positive reflections that mimicked hull distortion, system overheating, or internal power spikes. The Dominion ships, already blinded and disoriented, would believe they were being targeted or that something inside their own ships was failing, and that's when they would make mistakes. The first mistake came within 90 seconds. One of the forward patrol ships opened fire randomly, desperately, in what its sensor array insisted was a hostile energy bloom.
Oh.
The bolt of plasma lanced outward and struck one of its sister vessels directly in the dorsal engine. Cluster, no shielding, no preparation. The impact wasn't catastrophic, but it was enough to light up the Talari fleets. Comes like a lightning strike. Now they were shouting over one another, ships pulling in opposite directions, fighters launching without orders, chain of command eroding under the weight of a threat they could not define. Inside the silent edge, there were no cheers.
Oh, no reactions?
Just the continuation of a plan? Let's show them the edge of the blade, Reed said at last. That command unlocked Phase 3. From the aft bay, a shape emerged slightly larger than the previous drones. It wasn't a missile. It wasn't. Even fast, it drifted like wreckage, slowly rolling through the sensor storm the Dominion had created for themselves. It was shaped like a shard of metal twisted in a forged explosion, angular, blackened, and cold. There was no visible engine, but inside it, a yield of gravitational compression detonator, cores one of Earth's most recent defense innovations. Reed had no intention of using them in full force. He just wanted the aliens to know he could. The device activated 3 seconds after deployment, and for less than a second, it created a spatial bloom and artificial dent in local gravity, a pocket of inverted force that folded light and matter for 0.6 seconds before collapsing back into silence. The effect didn't touch any ships physically, but every scanner, every alarm system, every auto-defensive protocol in the Dominion fleet lit up with full-scale threat red. They thought it was a super weapon. They thought they'd just witnessed a new kind of weaponry beyond anything they had prepared for, and in the ensuing terror, their real mistake came. They tried to retreat, but their formation was gone. Their targeting scrambled. Their chain of command shattered. 3 ships collided mid-maneuver, scraping armor and triggering emergency shutdowns. One veered too close to the unstable rings of the gas giant and had to divert with a full burn. The flagship launched ECM flares against nothing. And in the center of it all, the silent edge turned calmly toward its next target. Authorization. To eliminate one, Keela said softly, watching the tumbling debris field from the previous incident. Reed waited, let the moment hang, then just one. The silent edge fired for the first time. No flash. No thunder. Just a magnetic spike from its rail cavity and the release of a single hypersonic kinetic slug sheathed in silence. It's moving faster than sound. Light. The projectile struck the central cruiser's command spine with surgical precision. No explosion. It's just an implosion, a collapsed hull, a failure cascade. The kind of death a ship doesn't even realize is happening until it's already finished dying. The Talari fleet went utterly still. In the sudden gap of action, they're surviving. Ships seemed to hesitate, like prey that had just seen the blur of a predator through the trees but didn't know which way to run. Now they understand, Reed said quietly, watching the cruiser's red icon disappear from the tactical map. Now they know what a warning looks like. No one answered. There was nothing to add. Because in the eyes of the Silent Edge's crew, the battle was no longer about defeating the Dominion fleet. It was about teaching them to be afraid. Asterisk in the cold vacuum above Veltraxis, the Talari fleet drifted in disarray, no longer a wall of dominance, but a disjointed cluster of wounded pride and fractured nerves. On the Dominion flagship Judicator Ascendant, the bridge was a storm of light, sound, and command signals, each more desperate than the last. Dozens of Talari officers worked their stations furiously, scales shimmering with stress, voices clipped as they attempted to piece together a tactical response to a phantom. The footage from the destroyed cruiser had been analyzed a dozen times. There was no projectile trail, no energy discharge, no time to react. One moment the ship's command core was intact. The next, it had collapsed inward, folding like paper under pressure. The Dominion had seen their ships destroyed in battle before, but never like this. This wasn't war. This wasn't a duel of tactics or firepower. This was precision extermination, Commander Karn. His voice, sharpened with disbelief, stood at the center of the chaos. He had stopped giving orders minutes ago. One seemed able to follow them. His officers had defaulted to autonomous protocols, attempting to regain formation, re-establish scanning grids, and isolate possible vectors of attack. None succeeded. Have we confirmed the location of the enemy? Karn growled, turning to his second. No, Commander. Sensor arrays remain compromised. Targeting data corrupted. false positives in every quadrant. Then triangulate trajectory. From the destroyed cruiser, Karn snapped. "We tried," the officer said, head low. The impact vector was nonlinear. It came from inside a spatial dead zone. Karn's eyes narrowed. "That's not possible." "Commander," another officer called out, "we're picking up gravitational interference again, localized. Field distortion. It's brief, controlled, artificial." Karn froze. Artificial. This wasn't a natural phenomenon. This wasn't spatial drift or ion interference. This was something being done to them, something carefully orchestrated. Slowly, Karn turned toward the forward viewport, staring out into the stars. He couldn't see it, but it was there. Somewhere just beyond the edge of his perception. "They're not cloaked," he muttered. His crew looked at him, confused. "They're not cloaked," he repeated, louder. "They're not there by the rules. We know. Their entire signature profile is outside our scanning logic. We're not being jammed. We're being bypassed." He had seen war across 17 systems. He'd fought swarm hives and fungal incursion. Fleets. He'd faced predators who killed for instinct and machines that killed for logic. But this was something new. Reroute all scanning power to full-spectrum gravitational and quantum interference tracking. Shut down conventional sweeps. They're giving us false data. A few officers hesitated. "Do it," he barked. The bridge snapped back into motion. Old systems were shut off. Deep-range detectors reactivated. Gravitational distortion erased. Mostly for asteroid monitoring, were deployed in full range. Still, the results were the same. Nothing then. Something flickered. Barely, a ripple in local space. Like light bending where no gravity should be. Not a ship, not a shadow, just absence. Isolate. That, Karn demanded. His tactical chief leaned over the console, claws dancing across keys. "I've got a signature disturbance. Not mass-based, not thermal. A vacuum echo, Commander. Something moved fast. Between our ships." Karn stepped forward, heart pounding. "Now between—" "Yes, sir?" "Past less than 600 meters from the Dusk Herald that's inside our formation radius." Karn's voice dropped into a whisper. "They're inside our perimeter?" Before anyone could respond, the Dusk Herald exploded. No warning. No strike trail. No communications. One moment it was there, then a pulse of light, debris, and silence. The entire bridge froze. That was when panic truly set in. Across the fleet, orders were issued to fall back not as a unit, but as individuals. A scatter protocol. Pilots launched in escape pods. Automated defenses spun to life, but they had no direction to aim. The target was never seen, only the aftermath. The Talari fleet, once a shining spear of galactic power, had become a cloud of desperate, uncoordinated survivors flailing in the dark on board the Silent Edge. Reed watched the chaos unfold, expression flat.
"They saw the confusion on their fleet net."
He saw their scatter patterns, their misfires, the terrified overcorrection in every movement. Commander Keela said quietly, "They're breaking formation. Majority of units are moving in random vectors." "They're not used to fear," Reed replied. "They've never had to run without knowing from what." He paused. "Let's make sure they don't forget." 2 more kinetic rounds were fired, one through the thruster column of a heavy escort, the other through the base of a command tower. Both ships died in seconds, spiraling into flaming debris. Each hit was clean, merciless, perfectly timed with Dominion course corrections. "Now disable their carrier," Reed said. Keela hesitated. "Disable? Not destroy? They need to live long enough to report what happened." Silent. Edge deployed a pulse cannon, its only overt energy weapon. One brief burst. It struck the carrier's com tower, not explosive, but catastrophic to their long-range transmitters. The fleet's loudest voice had been silenced. "Shall we finish them?" Keela asked. "No," Reed said. "They've already been finished. They just don't know what part of them died yet." He leaned back in his chair. "They came here to find a threat. Now they'll return, knowing they never saw it until it had already passed through them." Silence settled again. In space, the Dominion survivors limped away, broken, blind, and reeling. Not from loss of ships, but from loss of certainty. From the realization that the galaxy had changed while they were too proud to notice, the silent edge remained in the shadows, unseen, untouched, watching, waiting, far beyond Veltraxis. The battlefield was no longer lit by explosions, but by wreckage. Massive pieces of Dominion cruisers floated silently, some still venting atmosphere and plasma into the void, others cracked open like brittle shells. Dozens of escape pods dotted the perimeter, blinking faint distress beacons that flickered out before reaching any real help. The Talari fleet, once a spearhead of precision and dominance, was now nothing more than a scattered debris field, drifting helplessly against the gravitational pull of a dead moon. Aboard the silent edge, the lights remained low. No announcements of victory echoed through the bridge. No cheers, no congratulations, no celebratory chatter. The crew moved as they always did, calm, controlled, efficient. Each member had reviewed their role in this mission thousands of times. There was no glory in execution. It was only purpose. Commander Reed stood before the projection of the wreckage field, his hands clasped behind his back. The data from the Dominion fleet scrolled across the screen, ships destroyed. Escape vectors predicted, long-range signal attempts mapped and tagged. But it wasn't the destruction that held its attention. It was the reaction. The last 20 minutes of Dominion fleet transmissions told a story clearer than any battle log. Officers barking contradictory orders. Sensor techs weeping into open coms. High command override attempts being rejected by junior pilots who'd given up on structure altogether, not just fear collapse. Keela's voice broke the quiet. Final. Intercept drone is returning. No trace of active retaliation attempts. We're outside all pursuit range. Reed nodded. Then we've done our job. Lieutenant Hale from engineering turned in his seat. What do we log as primary outcome? Sir, Reed glanced over. Proof of concept. He walked slowly back to his station, tapping into the encrypted comms channel reserved for Earth's strategic command. A brief burst of coded data was all that would be sent. No video, no voice. Just a timestamp and a result. Operation Phantom. Field. Successful. Stealth engagement effective. Threat neutralized. No trace. The message would be routed through 6 relays, bent through signal folds, erased and rewritten by algorithms that would make it look like background radiation too. Anyone else? In 20 minutes, Earth's highest military body would know what happened here, and they would say nothing. There would be no war declarations. No. Broadcasted triumph because the silent edge didn't exist, and that was the whole point. Below them, one of the Talari destroyers, damaged but not destroyed, began drifting toward the orbital path of Veltraxis's 13th moon. Its engines were down. Life signs were minimal. Inside, survivors were likely huddled in emergency chambers, praying to whatever gods they had that the predators finished their hunt. Reed let the image linger. He wasn't without sympathy, but he wasn't here to offer mercy. This had never been a massacre. It had been a message. The Talari Dominion had grown fat on stories of their superiority, on victories earned in eras when their enemies didn't have access to Earth's kind of madness. They believed they had seen all the galaxy had to offer, but they hadn't seen stealth without cloaking. They hadn't seen kinetic strikes from a cold ship. They hadn't seen a warship without lights, without ego, without fear, until today. And they would never forget it. Bring us about, Reed said. You drift back through the debris line. Minimum thrust. Emission masks engaged. E. hesitated. You want us to show ourselves? Reed's lips curled slightly, not a smile, but close. Only a silhouette, he said. It's just enough for the carrier to get one final look. The silent edge glided out from behind the ruined moon, its obsidian hull catching just a sliver of backlight from the nearby star. For less than a second, one of the remaining Talari ships, its viewport still intact, captured a glimpse of something impossibly sleek and terrifyingly still. Like the blade of a scalpel suspended in the void, and then it vanished again, slipping back into darkness like a memory already beginning to fade. On board the Talari carrier, Wounded commander was pulled from the wreckage by medtechs, his face smeared with coolant and blood. He was still whispering the same words over and over, even as his breathing slowed. It didn't show up. It was never there. It was never supposed to be there. And he was right. The Silent Edge had been humanity's first step into invisible warfare. Not built to fight invasions, not built to destroy worlds. It was built to make sure that, when someone threatened Earth again, they would feel something cold watching them before they ever pulled a trigger. They would feel doubt, and doubt, for most species, was lethal. Reed took one last look at the tactical feed as the Dominion ships drifted farther behind them. He tapped a control, dimming the screen. "No survivors worth shooting," he said. Let them run home. And with that, the Silent Edge powered down its visible systems, folded into blackness, and disappeared once more silent, unseen, forever unspoken. A legend just beginning to form. Asterisk far across the stars, deep within the Talari dominions. Inner systems, the capital world of Erlon Prime, buzzed with unease. High above its glittering surface, in a vaulted chamber of polished obsidian and humming crystal, the Dominion War Council stood in rigid silence around a triangular holotable. What should have been a normal status review routine fleet reports. Resource requisitions, border patrol updates, had been hijacked by a single data file, a file that should not exist. It had arrived through secure military channels, tagged with 27 levels of encryption, each requiring direct biometric authentication from fleet-level officers. The source, Judicator Ascendant, the Dominion's 7th Fleet flagship. The content, a final telemetry dump from its tactical logs, followed by 6 minutes of fragmented comms audio, terminated abruptly. The report's title was only 3 words: Enemy Unseen. Result, collapse. The Supreme Coordinator, a withered Talari with ceremonial armor and dull, faded scales, stared at the projection. His voice, when it came, cracked the stillness like dry thunder. "Explain this." No one moved. Not the intelligence. Minister, not the High Admiral, not the Sub-Council of Military Operations. They had reviewed the data all night, over and over. And the more they reviewed it, the worse it became. The fleet hadn't just lost contact. They hadn't just been ambushed. They had been undone. What little video remained showed phantom sensor echoes, inexplicable ship failures, overlapping distress calls that contradicted one another. Some ships had been destroyed by precise kinetic strikes, others by accidents that shouldn't have occurred: collisions, misfires, desperate maneuvers into planetary rings. The ships never reported a visible enemy. They never engaged in battle. And yet they were gone. The final count: 16 ships lost or crippled. 2 carriers abandoned, 83% of the command structure killed or missing. The High Admiral finally spoke. His tone lacked the usual steel. There were no plasma burns, no thermal residuals. Nothing registered on the gravimetric scanners until it was too late. Whatever it was, it moved faster than any known warp signature. And it didn't jam our sensors. It stepped around them. He turned slowly to the Council. Our ships were dismantled by something they couldn't even see. We didn't face an army. We faced a ghost. Another counselor leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Do we know who it was?" No one answered, because deep down, they all did. The human signature was embedded in the drone telemetry, Earth-standard kinetic mass, Earth-style targeting matrix. A hidden ID beacon pinged once, only once, from a ship designation they had never seen before. Silent Edge. There were no records of such a ship. No formal registry, not even black site rumors. And yet it had existed, even if only for those 6 fatal minutes in Dominion space. The silence in the chamber deepened until it felt like stone. At last, Supreme Coordinator turned to the Intelligence Minister. Was this a first strike? The Minister, a sallow-faced Talari with cybernetic eyes, replied coldly, "No. If it had been, there'd be no survivors at all. This was a warning." He tapped a panel, and the projection changed. A still frame captured by one of the final Camera drones from the Dusk Herald. The image was faint. But there, etched against the backdrop of the stars, was the silhouette of a ship. Black against black, curved like a claw, and angular like a blade. For less than a second, it had been visible, then nothing. The file had only one tag from the surviving crew, a shape in the dark. The coordinator sat back slowly, spine stiff. He closed his eyes for a long moment, as if trying to absorb the weight of what this meant. Earth had never formally declared war. They were relatively new to the galactic stage, often underestimated by older empires, but they had progressed with astonishing speed, technologically, politically, socially. The Dominion had kept an eye on them, of course. Had even issued quiet warnings about containment strategy for this unpredictable upstart species. But the mistake, the fatal mistake, had been assuming containment was still possible. The Supreme Coordinator opened his eyes. "We will not." "Retaliate," he said at last. The chamber erupted in protest. "Let them strike again. Show weakness. They've crossed into our territory. This is madness." But the Coordinator raised one clawed hand. "No, it's not weakness. It's recognition." He stared again at the image of the Silent Edge. They did not destroy the fleet because they had to. They did it to prove they could. We pushed them. And they responded not with armies, but with precision. They do not seek conquest. They don't need territory. They only need us to know one thing. He looked around the room. They are watching. And they are prepared. The room went quiet again, because even the most hawkish members of the council, he knew the truth. If Earth had built one ship like the Silent Edge, it could build hundreds. And if a single ghost had dismantled a fleet without being seen, what could an entire fleet of ghosts do? The Coordinator spoke once more. "Send a message to Earth, not an apology, not a threat. Just a statement." He dictated the words slowly. "The Dominion acknowledges the encounter. No further provocations will occur. We accept the limits of our reach." The message would be rooted, cloaked, and sterilized, delivered with the subtlety such a gesture required, and in the depths of Earth's listening stations. Someone would read it. Someone who understood the weight of those words and would smile. Quietly, because the mission had been more than a test of stealth, more than a tactical operation. It had been a statement, and the statement had been received. Asterisk. Back in the dark cradle of the Sol system. Orbiting Earth at a quiet Lagrange point, shielded from civilian satellites and curious telescopes, the Silent Edge returned home. There were no sirens when it docked. No war anthem, no hero's welcome. Just the soft magnetic hiss as the stealth docking clamps engaged. And the black blade of a ship that technically did not exist slid into place within the hidden hangar bay of Outpost Hermes, an unregistered orbital platform officially labeled as orbital debris tracking infrastructure. Unofficially, it was where Earth stored the sharpest knives it never admitted it forged. Commander Reed disembarked last, as always. His boots echoed against the titanium deck plating, his uniform. Clean but unadorned, no medals, no ribbons, no insignia beyond a single black star stitched into his left shoulder. Behind him, the crew filed out in silence. 12 people who had stared into the heart of an empire and dismantled it without firing a warhead. They didn't need a debrief. Everything that needed to be said had been recorded, encrypted, and sent ahead in real-time data packets through laser bursts so tight they barely existed between binary pulses. The mission was done. But the impact was only beginning. Deep within the secure command center of Hermes, high-ranking Earth officials, representing no single nation, no official alliance, just a select unit simply referred to as Directive Black, were reviewing the after-action reports. They sat in low light, surrounded by projected telemetry and abstracted combat footage stripped of identifying markers. All of it cold, clinical, calculated. They had seen the Dominion scramble to make sense of what happened. They had intercepted the panicked data requests being sent from Talari command centers to various Black Site labs. They had watched the retreating ships shift from combat formation to emergency recovery within hours. And, most importantly, they had read the message. Delivered through diplomatic shadows, unsigned but unmistakably Talarian tone, acknowledged. Provocation concluded, no further engagement. One of the directives, observers, an older man with slate-gray eyes and the demeanor of a historian, turned to the others and said. They blinked. Other, a woman with her hair in a tight coil and fingers dusted with data gel from Endless. Neural interface scanning responded, no. They folded. There were no plans for invasion. Earth didn't want Talari territory. There were no resource shortages, no ancient vendettas. What Earth had wanted, what Directive Black had ordered was far more strategic recognition. To step out of the cradle of obscurity and into the minds of the galaxy's old powers, not as a wild card, not as an unpredictable force, but as a known and measured danger. The kind that didn't need numbers to win. The kind that made you rethink every border, every scan, every assumption. The kind that changed the game without ever announcing it had entered the board. And Silent Edge had done just that. Later that cycle, Reed stood in a private briefing chamber, not debriefed, but observed. He gave no dramatic speech, no flowery explanation. He delivered numbers, durations, confirmed that no identifying signals were left behind, that the enemy saw what Earth wanted them to see, and nothing more. One asked him, eventually, why. He didn't finish the Talari fleet off completely. He looked up, met the speaker's eyes, and said, because terror spreads farther than wreckage. They'll remember what they couldn't stop, what they couldn't even find. They'll remember. Being watched, he paused. Dead men don't tell stories, but frightened ones, they build legends. No one questioned him again. In the weeks that followed, Earth's name passed from system to system, not through official channels, but in whispers. On mining rigs orbiting brown dwarfs, in smugglers' cantinas docked to forgotten asteroids, within encryption-locked military, forums belonging to alien empires that had never before considered Earth worth the ink. They spoke of a ship that didn't show up on scans, of a fleet that blinked out of existence in minutes, of a war that never officially started but ended. The moment someone said, they're here. They called it the Phantom War. They called the ship the Ghost Blade. They called the crew shadows in uniform. They would never know the real name or the real number of those involved, or that it had all been conducted for a single reason, so that next time when Earth asked for a seat at the table, no one would dare say no. Not out of diplomacy, not out of trade, but because every admiral, every general, and every old empire ruler would remember what happened when Earth said nothing at all, and simply showed up, and in the quiet depths of Outpost Hermes, the Silent Edge waited, refitted, refueled, patient. It didn't need parades. It didn't need medals. It only needed one thing, a reason to return.